Hello there, thrill seekers. I thought I would risk upsetting everybody and read you a passage from this book, I Am That by Nisargadatta Maharaj. This passage would have been recorded probably in, I'm guessing 1971, when there was a lot of violence, a huge war going on involving what was then called East Pakistan, which is now called Bangladesh. And so this questioner who attended one of Nisargadatta Maharaj's events or one of his talks was asking about that. So that's the background. And remember, East Pakistan, aka Bangladesh, was not that far from Bombay, where Nisargadatta Maharaj was talking. Probably the language, well, I don't know if it was the same language, but it was similar language, similar culture. So this was going on right within, like, so-called his people. So it was quite close, but also a bit removed. So let's see what the conversation was like. Okay. Questioner asks, there is suffering and bloodshed in East Pakistan at the present moment. How do you look at it? How does it appear to you? How do you react to it? Maharaj answers, in pure consciousness, nothing ever happens. Questioner says, please come down from these metaphysical heights. Of what use is it to a suffering man to be told that nobody is aware of his suffering but himself? To relegate everything to illusion is adding insult to injury. The Bengali of East Pakistan is a fact, and his suffering is a fact. Please do not analyze them out of existence. You are reading newspapers, you hear people talking about it, you cannot plead ignorance. Now, what is your attitude to what is happening? And Maharaj answers, no attitude. Nothing is happening. And this person says, any day there may be a riot in front of you, perhaps people killing each other. Surely you cannot say nothing is happening and remain aloof. Now remember, this is a real possibility when he was talking. It didn't actually happen that way. But he's talking about something that was considered to be like a very real possibility. And this is the part of the answer that I would like to ask you to pay attention to, because I'm going to talk about the comments after when I put this on Instagram, and I got some comments, and I think a lot of people missed this passage. This is Nisargadatta Maharaj answering. I never talked of remaining aloof. You could as well see me jumping into the fray to save somebody and getting killed. Yet to me, nothing happened. Imagine a big building collapsing. Some rooms are in ruins, some are intact. But can you speak of the space as ruined or intact? It is only the structure that suffered and the people who happened to live in it. Nothing happened to the space itself. Similarly, nothing happens to life when forms break down and names are wiped out. The goldsmith melts down old ornaments to make new. Sometimes a good piece goes with the bad. He takes it in his stride, for he knows that no gold is lost. And the questioner responds, it is not death that I rebel against, it is the manner of dying. Here's another passage that I think some of the people who commented on Instagram missed, so let's pay attention. Death is natural. The manner of dying is man-made. Separateness causes fear and aggression, which again cause violence. Do away with man-made separations, and all this horror of people killing each other will surely end. But in reality, there is no killing and dying. The real does not die. The unreal never lived. Set your mind right, and all will be right. When you know that the world is one, that humanity is one, you will act accordingly. But first of all, you must attend to the way you feel, think, and live. Unless there is order in yourself, there can be no order in the world. Let's say that again. Unless there is order in yourself, there can be no order in the world. In reality, nothing happens. Onto the screen of the mind, destiny forever projects its pictures, memories of former projections, and thus illusion constantly renews itself. The pictures come and go, light intercepted by ignorance. See the light and disregard the picture. And the questioner responds, what a callous way of looking at things. People are killing and getting killed, and here you talk of pictures. Maharaj answers, by all means, go and get killed yourself. if that is what you think you should do, or even go and kill, if you take it to be your duty. But that is not the way to end the evil. Evil is the stench of a mind that is diseased. Heal your mind and it will cease to project distorted, ugly pictures. The questioner says, "What you say I understand, but emotionally I cannot accept it. This merely idealistic view of life repels me deeply. I just cannot think myself to be permanently in a state of dream." Maharaj answers, "How can you be permanently in a state caused by an impermanent body? The misunderstanding is based on your idea that you are the body. Examine the idea. See its inherent contradictions. Realize that your present existence is like a shower of sparks, each spark lasting a second, and the shower itself a minute or two." It's interesting because that's a simile that Dogen also uses. "Surely a thing of which the beginning is the end can have no middle. Respect your terms. Reality cannot be momentary. It is timeless, but timelessness is not duration." The questioner answers, "I admit that the world in which I live is not the real world, but there is a real world of which I see a distorted picture. The distortion may be due to some blemish in my body or mind, but when you say there is no real world, only a dream world in my mind, I just cannot take it. I wish I could believe that all the horrors of existence are due to my having a body. Suicide would be the way out." He's wrong about that, but let's see how Nisargadatta Maharaj answers. "As long as you pay attention to ideas, your own or of others, you will be in trouble. But if you disregard all teachings, all books, anything put into words, and dive deeply within yourself and find yourself, this alone will solve all your problems and leave you in full mastery of every situation, because you will not be dominated by your ideas about the situation. Take an example." Now, this is an interesting and strange example, and I think I know why he goes here, but I don't know. Let me see if I want to talk about it. He says, "You are in the company of an attractive woman. You get ideas about her, and this creates a sexual situation. A problem is created, and you start looking for books on continence or enjoyment. When you were a baby, both of you could be naked and together without any problem arising. Just stop thinking you are bodies, and the problems of love and sex will lose their meaning. With all sense of limitation gone, fear, pain, and the search for pleasure all cease. Only awareness remains." Now, I find that very interesting because during much of the time that I was practicing and studying with Nishijima Roshi in Japan, the Second Gulf War was raging. George W. Bush had sent troops into Iraq after the events of September 11th, 2001, and so there was a lot of talk about this kind of stuff. I wish I had transcripts or something of some of it to kind of give you a flavor of it. Nishijima Roshi, would not answer things in the manner that Nisargadatta Maharaj was. He doesn't say things like everything is consciousness and nothing is really happening, that kind of stuff. He kind of avoided saying that. But I feel like in the background of the things he did say was lurking a similar sort of idea. And I think maybe one of the main differences between Zen and Advaita is there are differences in basic philosophy, but another big difference is the way of expressing it. The Zen people have kind of realized that you shouldn't talk this way because it just makes people upset. The Advaita people still talk that way anyhow. Let me read you some of the responses I got when I posted those 3 pages on Instagram. "His insights are often eye-opening. This one ignores suffering with mental gymnastics. Maybe some bodhisattva vows would have set him straight. It sounds like he's been on a mountain too long, forgetting how to engage in the world for the sake of all beings and instead referring to beings as metal to be smelted. This is making the world theory." Now, I pointed out to this person that Nisargadatta Maharaj did not live on a mountain. In fact, he lived in the slums of Bombay, now called Mumbai. So he was very familiar with suffering and with people who were suffering, probably greater than most of us in the Western world are acquainted with. I know that when I lived in Africa, when I lived in Nairobi, and I was just a little kid then, I was 11 years old when we moved away, but I was aware of the intensity of poverty and things that I would never have seen in America. Like the most impoverished homeless people in America are doing better, at least materially, than a lot of just ordinary folks in Africa. And yet, a lot of the folks in America living in those conditions are drugged out zombies, and the people in Africa living in materialistically worse conditions were often pretty happy about it. So that's a big difference, and I saw that happening, and it left a huge impression on me. But let's keep going. Somebody else says, this illustrates clearly the profound differences between Advaita and Zen! Nisargadatta Maharaj is teaching eternalism, which was rejected by the Buddha and Nagarjuna, and the unreality of phenomena, which is the antithesis of Dogen's teaching. I'm not sure the unreality of phenomena is the antithesis of Dogen's teaching, but that's kind of an interesting take, because I don't think that's it at all. Anyway, another person says, this view within Hinduism feels like it can be used to justify a lot of things, including exploitation within a caste system. The samurai of Japan also misunderstood emptiness and said the sword is empty, the blood is empty, and felt there was no karma in committing murder. I see that as spiritual bypassing. And it's quite intriguing, because these people are all taking this thing in a completely different way from how I took it. Because to me, it seemed in some ways really similar to the way Nishijima Roshi, his attitude towards the events of the war that was going on when I was studying with him. And his response to World War II, which he had lived through. He seemed maybe callous and aloof to suffering, but I don't think it was that, because being callous and aloof is a kind of ego response to things. And this was a response that was quite different from an egotistic response. Like an aloof or unfeeling, uncaring kind of dismissive response is a response of me dismissing that. But this is a response of being all of that all at once and seeing it from that point of view, which is quite different. My own experience of this is largely informed by how I experienced the events of September 11th, 2001. Now, I was living in Japan at the time, so I wasn't in America, but I was still, and still am, an American citizen. So it really affected me. But I remember when seeing that, having the clear sense, which was quite startling at the time, that there was something in me that produced these events. And the same thing with the war in Iraq, the Second Gulf War and all of that. I started to see that there was this thing in myself, this lust for excitement and being right, and this kind of ego sense of I am this. The Hindus say I am the body. Zen people don't usually worry about, people identifying with the body too much, but that's kind of in there in the background too. This is a whole, I'm not going to get to it in this whole video of trying to untangle all of that stuff. But there is this idea that what we really are isn't this form. There's something beyond all this, and there's a point of view that's beyond all this. Now, what do you do, though, when faced with this suffering? Now, what's interesting with Nisargadatta Maharaj, and what was interesting about Nishijima Roshi, is that Nisargadatta Maharaj is responding to the person right in front of him and responding to that person's emotional state and that person's suffering. Whereas this person who he's talking to, and often the people who were talking to Nishijima Roshi, were kind of expecting a response to the imaginary suffering of the imaginary person in the imaginary war. Now, of course, there's the real war going on, and there's real people, and we know all that. But if I am talking to somebody about the war over there, wherever the war happens to be, I'm talking about my imagined response of the imagined people of what I imagine the war to be. It's not the real thing. There is a real thing, But this isn't it. This isn't it. And so what Nisargadatta Maharaj is responding to is the person in front of him and the suffering of the person in front of him and trying to talk to that. And what he's advocating is kind of a long game, that he thinks that this person who is in front of him has some, maybe dimly, maybe less dimly, but has some hope of grasping. That there is an entirely different way of looking at things. And if this entirely different way of looking at things can permeate the world, then there will be an entirely different world. And that's what he's talking to. That's what he's speaking to. And that's what I'm speaking to often. And that's what Nishijima Roshi was speaking to. So there is a kind of currency, I think, especially these days with the social media and stuff, in having the right opinions and having the proper amount of, I don't know, compassion. I'm going to put that in quotes because I don't know if it's real compassion, or anger, or a feeling of supporting the right side, or the proper amount of anguish that you feel when seeing the pictures that appear on your computer screen of the carnage going on and all of that. And there's a kind of currency to doing that. And people who've invested a lot of that in that will get very angry at people who are not part of it, who are not participating in it. But I think that there is value in not participating in these imaginary wars in our minds and actually looking at what's really going on right here and right now and responding to that. Now, that can seem like aloofness, or I'm being indifferent to the suffering of these poor people, but there's not much I can do about the suffering of these poor people way over there. There's really not much. And my emotional response to their suffering, or at least to the pictures I'm seeing of the suffering and the reports that I'm hearing about their suffering, isn't going to alleviate their suffering. And what anybody who's observed the news cycle and things begins to realize, and I've realized, is that most of what you're hearing and seeing isn't true. I worked for a company in Japan whose specialty was special effects, making fake things on camera. And I remember talking to one of our photographers, a guy who was a staff photographer, about the way photographs lie. And this doesn't just mean photographs, the special effects photographs. This means just ordinary photographs, because they take this tiny picture. And that's what reports do that you hear. The best you're going to do, the most honest reporting, is always going to be this tiny sliver of a picture of something. And it's going to invite you to extrapolate a whole world around that. And sometimes the report or the picture is manipulated in such a way as to try to influence you to having a certain opinion about it. And you got to watch that stuff, because that's not real, because that's the play of the mind that's going on. So yeah, there you go. I've already talked longer than I intended to talk about this subject, so I'm going to stop here. I know I haven't reached any conclusion, but it's just something I wanted to point out and to see where we get with that. I don't know if we got anywhere. But if you want to help me keep going nowhere, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below. Let me get it right, which is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen, somewhere over here, .info/donate. There you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are how I make my living, and I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to. Also, I will be in Bozeman, Montana soon, and for information on that, go to hardcorezen.info/events, and there you will find a link to all the stuff. I believe it starts on November 8th and goes through November 10th. I might be getting that wrong, so go to the links, because that'll tell you where it's actually happening. I'm too scatterbrained to remember. So if you're in Bozeman or near Bozeman and want to come see me, that's you can get the link on how to do that. All right, we will see you next time. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey Ziggy, how do you feel about conflict and all that? I knew you were trying to have a conflict with one of the neighborhood dogs just now when we took you on a walk. You guys were barking at each other, weren't you? What do you guys do? What do you expect to happen? Because usually what happens is you bark at each other for a little while and then you become friends. Maybe that's what people should do, huh? All right, we'll talk to you later, Ziggy. Bye.
See you later. Yeah, yeah. Atenda.